This is Books for Breakfast, a podcast where we talk about books and writing. I'm Enda Wiley.
And I'm Peter Sirr.
And you're all very welcome to this morning's show.
Today, Julian Vignoles reviews Sinead O'Connor's memoir, Rememberings.
And poet Victoria Kennefick comes in to talk about her debut collection, Eat or We Both Starve, just out from Carcanet Press. So, the coffee's made.
The toast is on.
And the books are on the table.
Today, we'd like to welcome Julian Vignoles. Julian is a native of County Wicklow. He attended UCD, began his working career in hot press. He's won 3 Jacob Awards for his RTE documentary work. He moved to television as a producer-director and was assistant head of entertainment in RTE. In his own words, he's now a former RTE person, a bit of a writer and tour guide, which is a slight underestimation of his work because he's been active as a writer and his interests are wide-ranging. His book, A Delicate Wildness, was published by Ladybug Press, and that takes its title from Seamus Heaney's description of the writer David Thompson, who is most famous for his memoir Woodbrook, which was published back in 1976. And in this resonant biography of Thompson, Julian Vignoles reveals the lives and loves of this largely unsung writer to great effect. In his biography of Rory Gallagher, the man behind the guitar, published by Gill Books in 2018, Vignoles meticulously uncovers the life of this legendary guitarist and the complex personality that fueled his career. But he was also a member of the Eurovision Song Contest's board of directors, the reference group, for 6 years, and his book Inside the Eurovision Song Contest, published by Liffey Press, uncovers all the controversies and key players and inner workings of that competition over the last 10 years. So, with all that experience, I think he's ideally placed here at the breakfast table this morning to discuss with us Sinead O'Connor's Rememberings, which has just been published by Sandy Cove Penguin and is a unique memoir and chronicle of a global musical icon.
Yes, indeed, a global musical icon. Well, Julian, you're very welcome. And the responses to Rememberings have been outstanding, I think. Inspiring, liberating, hilarious and fascinating, the Irish Times said. Beautifully observed, lyrical, funny and anguish. That was from The Guardian. So good you'll want to read it twice. So I wonder if you read it twice. That's from the Sunday Independent. A soul-bearing, brutally honest account of an extraordinary life. That's the BBC Online. And devastating, wise, hilarious and original is what Roisin Ingle made of it when she read it. But I'm just wondering, Julian, does it live up to all this praise, do you think, as a memoir?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with most of that. But I, there's a few other things, but which we'll come to. I think the highest compliment you could pay a book is that you read it in less than 2 days, and I read this in less than 2 days. And my appetite had been whetted by the excerpts in the Irish Times, and I think as you'd expect, perhaps from Sinead, she doesn't write a conventional memoir. She doesn't write a conventional musical autobiography. I think that's one of the great charms of it, that she goes at it tangentially, and you have these 3 parts. And the first part is this kind of stream of consciousness thing about her childhood, and its colour and its tenses mixed up, and she's in the past and she's in the present, and these kind of figures come in and out, like the father, the stepmother, and her mother, of course, the famous mother, and brother Joe and sister Emer. Yeah. And it's a kind of it's a whistle stop of a childhood. Is it factual? Is it true? No, it doesn't matter. It's an impression that she has put down of this very mixed up kind of childhood, and that's its. Then it becomes the career, which is actually the highlights of it. Her career is actually quite short, as a lot of rock and roll careers are. And it's the late 80s and into the early 90s. And then she comes to part 3 is a kind of whistle stop tour of the records themselves, on the songs themselves. And in that, I think she's quite interesting because she's not precious about her material, I think, which is interesting. And even Springsteen, I found, could be kind of precious about the songs and the work. No, she just goes through them. And one of the things that comes out of that is, of course, that she had a way of turning kind of trauma into gold. I mean, for instance, that song 3 Babies, about 3 miscarriages. Who else would turn it around into a kind of really gripping song? So you have all these things. And then along the way, she has nice little brush strokes here and there. And humour, yes, but the brushstroke, she comes to Van Morrison and she said, Van Morrison, it's not the words, it's what he does with the sounds of the words.
Yeah, it's good. She is a real artist. Just listening to you there, the way you describe the opening of the book and the way it's nearly a collage of images, which in a way, childhood does feel like that, doesn't it? All these people entering your life. But celeb biographies, I thought it actually sounded quite haunting as well. And it just made me think as well, celeb biographies are often ghost written, but this one isn't. And it does make a big difference by listening to you there. You get a real sense of her voice, I think. And I was just wondering, this is Books for Breakfast. We interview writers, we talk about books. So I'd love to hear you just talking a little bit about what the writing is like, because I know she said there, it's not the words, it's how he puts his spirit or soul into the words. Has she put her soul into the writing, Julian?
I think so. And yes, it seems that it's her. But I mean, she's an impulsive person, and the writing it's an impulsive style, and there's no ornamentation, there's no listen, look at this lovely paragraph. There's none of that. It's actually she's written exactly how she felt, and I gather it was all done up. Most of the book was written. The early part, the childhood and middle years, was written before 2015. And it's just, and as I said earlier, she deliberately kind of gets tenses mixed up. And then she's a lovely description of the time her mother was killed. Did the car go to it? Did the bus go around the corner? No, I couldn't ask my brother. No, anyway, she was dead. So that kind of, and then she, a very interesting account of her time in High Park, the place that had the Magdalen laundry. And it's kind of interesting because it goes against a lot of the notions of such places, and that it seems to be quite benign. I mean, she doesn't give out about the nuns. She talks about the traveller girls she met. And that, and it's kind of an insight into their lives. And then she came and went. And then there's funny things like, you'd be at Mass, and her mother's problem wasn't that she put money in the plate at Mass. She kept taking money out of the plate. It's kind of stuff. And it's all as a throwaway. All these things are little throwaways. And then she says about the mother, I still can't think of her in the past tense. All those years later,
Which is very honest in a way, isn't it? It's how many people think about people in their lives who are dead. They sound like there's little gems within it.
There's lovely gems.
Anyway, Peter, I know, Peter, you want to get in there too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think because obviously we're talking about trauma, and there was an awful lot of trauma in her childhood, which she describes as well. But fame, it didn't deliver her from or exercise that trauma. If anything, it seemed to add to it. The fame and the pressures of being a star, a singer, and all of that. She seemed to kind of be constantly kind of re-traumatized in some way.
Yeah, I think she never settled, and she played the game in a sense that, she made the records. She did all the publicity. She did the tours. She did all that. And yet she was rebelling against it. I mean, and then there's one point where she says, "No, I'm a protest singer. I never cared about my career." Yeah, but she did too, and she did what some managers advised. She was. I think there's a canniness behind all the so-called crazy stuff, and I think that's one of the interesting things about Sinead. That we admire her singing, we admire her writing, we admire her as a singer, we admire her as a writer, and then you wonder, is there a plan in all this? She does suffer from mental health problems, but to what extent has she in almost used them? I mean, we look and we say, what's she going to do next? And I think that's there's a whiff of sulphur in a way, very much so, about Sinead O'Connor. And I think that's why this book is so interesting, and it's why it's got so much praise.
Yeah, I was thinking, Peter and I were thinking before you came on, Julian, it would be great if you could just take us back a little bit to her early years, how she broke onto the music scene so suddenly and brilliantly. I mean, I remember it, I'm giving away my age now, but the first album, The Lion and the Cobra, Mandinka, Troy, they were all extraordinary songs. Does she cover that in the memoir as well, the beginning parts? And
Yeah, she did. She talks about those songs that a lot of them were written when she was much younger, and when she was
Wow,
14 and
amazing.
15. She just got ideas for those songs, and she, of course, kept them. And most of the line on the Cobra is that
Yeah.
stuff. And the line on the Cobra, of course, is a biblical image. And then, of course, and then we have things like Three Babies. You know, the last day of our acquaintance. You know, the thing where she holding her manager's hand, and you know, you used to hold my hand when the plane took off, and now you don't do it anymore. This kind of, you know, those.
Yeah.
And then black boys on mopeds. You know, because in a particular incident in London where these kids on black guys on mopeds were followed by the police and crashed.
She can be very visual, can't she? Like that image of that. But I just remember the shock, like when you first saw her, you just felt this shiver go down your spine. She was just electrifying, really.
And there's a grimness. I mean, even on I mean, I Am Stretched on Your Grave. So she took a traditional song, but it's mournful. And it has that very darkness was very successful for her.
Julian, I'm thinking that, you know, some of the things that happened, I mean, you know, for instance, some of the things that she did caused huge offence at the time. Like, I mean, that whole thing about tearing up the picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live to protest about, you know, sexual abuse within the Catholic Church. And it's funny because, you know, obviously it's caused this massive offence at the time, probably harmed her career. But when you look back at it now, it probably seems entirely reasonable in many senses, given what we now know. But what effect did that have on her career? I mean, I think she even at one stage put on a wig and protested against herself.
Yeah, that shows that humour. And there's a picture of her actually protesting. It's one of the amusing things. But yeah, it's I mean, even whether you like Pope John Paul or not, and I'd be a fan, I suppose, in lots of ways. I mean, yeah, he's a public figure, and the reaction to tearing up the photograph was incredible. But I mean, then saying she didn't want the Star Spangled Banner played at her gigs, and that was the furore, right? Now that would be kind of maybe hip for some people. You know, it's funny how what it is 30 years ago, of course. I'm not sure did it damage her career? I mean, certainly her core audience would be rebellious types, perhaps, who wouldn't have made much difference. But maybe the career had only a certain duration anyway, as a lot of them do. I think of Rory Gallagher, you know, totally contrasting in nearly every other respect. But you get a high point, and then what Bruce Springsteen referred to it as the crisis of longevity. The challenge of longevity, that you're trying to keep something going, and you're up there as a star, and the star is starting to fall, and you have to keep making it rise up in the sky again. And Springsteen, of course, is one of the people, and Dylan did that so successfully. But it's a struggle for a lot of people. And I mean, Sinead's her biggest success was the Prince song, of course, Nothing Compares to You, which still is a showstopper for her. Even on the late last year,
which is an amazing performance again of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, beautiful. But there are lots of famous people in the book that you just mentioned. Prince, he doesn't come out of it too great. Sure, he doesn't. But Lou Reed does. And how did the famous people like Dylan, Prince, Lou Reed, Muhammad Ali even come out of it in the book?
She has a crow to pluck with Dylan, yeah, because he didn't defend her when at his birthday party in 92, when she went out and she was booed, and Chris Christopherson kind of put his arm around her and don't let the bastards get you down, all that. And she thought Dylan could have put in a word for her with his fans. I said, listen, let the girl sing, kind of thing. But he didn't, because Dylan is kind of smart. He saw the writing on the wall, so to speak. And of course, she was going to sing one of his songs. She was going to sing I Believe in You from the Slow Train Coming. And she ended up just shouting and screaming the Bob Marley song War. And there was war.
And what happened with Prince? There was a story about Prince chasing around the
That's
place.
a bizarre kind of story. It's funny. I thought it was maybe she wasted too much space in the book talking about it. It's pages and pages, and he did, and then the pillow fight, and then this driver guy who appears and reappears, and then Prince offers her soup, and she said, "No, I don't want any soup. No, you have to have soup. No, I don't want any soup," and all this.
It's such a crazy world, isn't it? But also, Bob Geldof has said that only Sinead O'Connor could have had the strength of character to bear being Sinead O'Connor. Does that make sense to you, Julian, having read the book now?
Yeah, the challenge of being yourself. Yeah, but
I know. She feels it herself, the weight of the challenge of being her, and having to carry that.
Yeah, and I love the way she has both a postscript and an epilogue, and the postscript is the letter to her father saying, okay, even if the Virgin Mary and Joseph were her parents, I'd still be crazy. So don't worry about it, dear. And she's kind of affectionate towards her father. So I think it's a good way to end the book.
Julian, I'm just wondering, she recently announced her retirement from music, and then she has more recently again rescinded that. So where does that leave her now?
It looks awfully like a stunt. But I mean, then again, she's somebody who changes her mind about things. She peculiar relationship to Catholicism. She'll use that image of in the letter to her father about the Virgin Mary and Joseph, and yet she'll excoriate Catholicism in another page, or advocate a Muslim thesis, and again, it's part of the fascination. Now, I think that the withdrawal of her resignation, of her retirement was. I mean, it might have been just that she thought again about it. I suspect that it was part of her internal book marketing strategy. And I think the Woman's Hour, I mean, to start saying that the presenter of Woman's Hour was misogynistic because she quotes a journalist, Neil McCormick, actually, as saying that Sinead was a crazy woman in Pop's attic. That's par for the course. That's, I suspect that it was the Pop's attic what probably got her more than the crazy woman, because she says she's crazy, she's loony, lots of times in the book. In fact, I think she deals with the mental health issues very well in it. But Pop's attic implies that you're a has-been. And I think that might have got to her more than anything.
Anybody who saw her recently knows that her voice is as powerful as ever. She knows it as well. So let's hope she isn't going into retirement and she's going to keep singing. And I think from what you're saying there, Julian, there is a sense that she is going to keep doing it. So we'd all love that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we might even put Julian on the spot and say, like, what would you pick as your kind of top, kind of 2 or 3 Sinead songs? That's mean.
Peter, you're very mean. Poor Julian. He's only just woken up.
I mean, I like Mandinka. I like Nothing Compares to You. I like Three Babies. I love the covers, like when she does a Redemption Song, Marley, or Dylan, I Believe in You, which she does at gigs. Those are the first ones I think of. It's interesting, actually, that she talks about her early influences, and I mean, there's obvious things like Toots and the Maytals. 5446 was my number, and Israelites and those kind of things. And then she talks about crying when she heard Streets of London and Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. So she had a sentimental kind of side to her, which is interesting. And lots of people would probably dismiss those songs as kind of weepies or not exactly cool rock and roll. So that's again an interesting thing about her.
But also they suit her voice, don't they? I think she has this voice which aches when she sings, and you really feel the emotion in it. So it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
And
I think she sees qualities in those kind of songs that maybe others might dismiss. They suit her voice. One of the things I think in the book is, and I think the Guardian reviewer said it, she doesn't do regret. And that's kind of an interesting thing. That, I mean, she goes into the details of the 4 men who she had relationships with and she had children with. and she names the kids. And she said, well, I only speak to two of them, two of the fathers. And I mean, that's, somebody else might keep writing and say, well, no, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. No, that's it. I'm a good mother to my Jake, Roisin, Shane, and Yeshua, but I've nothing to do with two of the fathers. So that's another interesting aspect of her, I think.
Well, have we anything else to ask, Peter? I mean, Julian, you've been so good. Yeah, you've really given us a great insight into the book, I think. So thank you, Julian Vignoles, for coming in to talk about Rememberings, a recent memoir by Sinead O'Connor, published by Sandy Cove. That's the Dublin-based imprint of Penguin Random House. And as usual, details will be on www.booksforbreakfast.com. And we're off to have some more coffee now, aren't we, Peter?
Indeed we are, yeah.
As the title of my collection, Eat or We Both Starve, suggests, many of the poems are about eating or consuming in general. And this poem comes very early in the collection. It's the second poem in the collection. And it is, I suppose, what I describe as my vegetarian origin story, set in the English market in Cork, where if any of you have been lucky enough to visit, you will find all sorts of delicious and very fresh foodstuffs. Meat. I sucked marrow from bones at dinner, my father's face a bloody grin of pride. I ate liver in chunks for breakfast, pink and firm, jewels to adorn my insides. I gloried in the feel of flesh, the exertion of the chew. Holding my mother's hand in the English market, I saw them. Turkey chandeliers plucked, bruised purple eyelids, dainty light bulbs. Their smell, fresh as the insides of my mouth. Mother stroked my hair. There. I refused to eat meat, became pillowy, meek. She hid muscle under mashed potato. I tasted its tang in soup. Eat up, my parents said. I could not swallow. My skin goose pimple yellow, doctors drew blood in tiny, regular sips. Teeth turned to glass and shattered in my mouth. All I could taste was blood.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. A bit early in the morning for all of that, I think, but I'm very happy to hear it and to think about the market in Cork as well, one of my favourite places. So that was Victoria Kennefick. She was reading her poem Meat, capital M in brackets, eat on its side. I love that in the title, Victoria. From Eat or We Both Starve, published by Carcanet 2021. I really think these are fresh, they're urgent, they're original poems. And it's a book which begins with a quote from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Alas, what wickedness to swallow flesh into our own flesh, to fatten our greedy bodies by cramming in other bodies, to have one living creature fed by the death of another. Grisly stuff. And this, along with the poem we've just heard, gives us some sense as readers as to what lies ahead for us. Poems about many things, but most strikingly, as Victoria has just said, about consumption, gluttony, but also hunger, meat, but also vegetarianism. And so with all this talk of consumption, it seems very appropriate that Victoria is at the breakfast table this morning. And you're very welcome and congratulations on your debut collection.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here.
It is lovely indeed. I think Peter's worried because two women here who love to yap. We're in trouble. Well, just to tell people a little bit about Victoria. Victoria grew up in Cork. She lives in Kerry in Tralee. Her pamphlet White Whale won the Munster Literature Centre Chapbook Competition in 2014 and the Saboteur Award for Best Poetry Pamphlet in 2015. She was named an Arts Council Next Generation Artist in 2016. Her poems have appeared in Poetry Magazine, PN Review, the Poetry Review, Poetry Ireland Review, the Stinging Fly and lots of other places. And it's great to have her here at our podcast because she also co-hosts the Unlaunched Books podcast with poets John McAuliffe and Sean Hewitt. So you're well versed in podcasts, Victoria. Well, just to begin, this collection is dedicated to your mother, which is an act of love. And yet, surprisingly, the opening poem has you eating teaching her. In the poem Learning to Eat My Mother, where my mother is the teacher, you say, I do not want to eat her ribs, but I do, then strip her fingers of meat. But for all the violence, Victoria, of gorging on your mother, there is a tenderness too. I hold them tenderly in my mouth. You're talking about the ribs. Watch her blue eyes well up out of love, I assume. And I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about the balancing of the brutal and the tender in your work?
That was something that was very difficult to achieve and something that I grappled with quite a lot. I'm always drawn to Flannery O'Connor, who I studied for my PhD, and I spent some time in the American South studying her work, and I've always felt like she wouldn't like my work, which is partly why I actually studied her as some sort of masochistic practice. But one of the quotes that always stuck with me is, to the hard of hearing you shout, and for the almost blind you draw large and startling figures. And I think putting this at the opening of the book was a really intentional act, because I think it does set up that sense of trying to exaggerate, almost caricature, but not quite, I hope, that act of love that exists between a parent and a child, and how we, in many respects, are, I suppose, consuming and living off the energy and the love and the literal food that is provided for us by our parents. And that legacy is part of that. So it's almost like you're consuming the past of your parents, their parents' past, and so on. And how does that manifest in you as a person? And how aware are you of what you've eaten, so to speak? So I think it is an attempt as well to turn the tables on that idea of the all-consuming mother, which I have, I'm interested in exploring that notion that, the mother is the one consuming the life of the child and so on, when in my short experience of being a mother so far, I think it's perhaps very much the child is eating you.
Yeah, I know. There is kind of a grotesque drama to the whole thing, which I was really intrigued by. In one of your poems, Cure for Anemia, you're talking about the doctor recommending that you eat the muscle and fat I've avoided since I was 8. And I'm just wondering, excuse the pun, but has this grotesque feeling towards meat always consumed you?
It's interesting because I think when I was a younger child, so say maybe until about the age of 6 or 7, I absolutely adored meat. Like I would literally have liver for breakfast and I would suck the marrow from bones. Like I really, really enjoyed it. And It was a gradual realization. I think there was that moment in the English market, certainly seeing those turkeys hanging upside down. And I remember sitting on my paternal grandmother's lap, and we had a field next door to us in Shanagarry. And my uncle's lambs were gambolling and frolicking in the field. And I was delighted by it, of course. And my grandmother, ever the pragmatist, said, oh, soon they will be on our table. And I still remember that shock, going, lamb, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. So I think my mom, she did, hide meat and so on from me. But I think there was really a sense of finding it very difficult to stomach meat, because I didn't want to thrive or grow or live off the sacrifice of others. I felt that really, really keenly around the age of 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to kind of go back, and certainly for health reasons a little while ago when I did struggle with anemia, that I just couldn't, like I had this plate of chicken curry and I just cried. I just couldn't eat it. It's like such an emotional, visceral thing that I can't really control. And I do think it's about control too, because there's nothing more wonderful to me to go into a restaurant, gosh, hopefully soon we'll all be going, and look at the menu and see only 2 things for me. Like I find that really comforting, as opposed to having to choose from a wide variety of things. So I think there's something about control there as well, very much.
Yeah, control. Well, you've used words like visceral and shock. And I actually did get visceral shocks reading this collection, which I don't know, I think it was a good thing. And to get back to your poem, Learning to Eat My Mother, where my mother is the teacher, I think that's a fine example of that. The female narrator is beating herself, her breasts and hips deformed in that poem. It's kind of brutal, startling poetry. It says a lot about being a woman, I think, doesn't it? About sex and the female body too.
Yes, and again, that was something that I was very concerned with writing these poems, and continue to be. That sense of, it's an impossible position, I feel, to be a woman in the world at the moment. Mm-hmm. trying to embody and project what it is you're supposed to. And, these tropes, these female tropes that we've been kind of basically, that we've eaten up our whole lives are so old and they're so difficult to shake. And I think there is this sense, this anxiety in the book that I saw very much afterwards when I read it of the fear of growing up, being a girl and having a certain level of freedom and being, to a degree, confident and in control of your body. And then suddenly around maybe 8, 9, pre-puberty starts and your body is like a train and it's running away from you and you have to deal with very, very grown up, mature elements of being a woman when you're still maybe not psychologically or emotionally ready for that. And I find that transition from girlhood into womanhood, it was very painful for me and very difficult and awkward for me, which I hope it probably comes through in the book, I hope. But and a time of celebration too. So it's kind of a very complicated moment, I think, that I don't know, do any of us really recover from or forget?
And also, I loved that memory. It's a really vital force in your poems. Poem Choke, I found it's really arresting. A cousin gives you a boiled sweet, eating again, and you start to choke until your father turns you upside down. But then you say there's another version where your mother is pushing the sweet down your throat with her finger. Maybe that's what you're looking for. So you're using words like version and maybe. And then I began thinking that memory is really a shifting thing. And can you talk a little bit about that, about the importance of memory in your poems?
I think that's a fascinating subject, and I think it very much stems from my reticence, to say the least, around change. I find change impossible. I've gotten better at it, obviously, as I've grown older, but as a child, found it very, very difficult. Even, the wallpaper in my room being changed, I would have an existential crisis for a couple of days. And interestingly, I just recently, my daughter's bedroom is, it goes through stages, but I tidied it recently and she was initially delighted. And then she cried for about half an hour because she missed it the old way. Okay. So I think memory and nostalgia and that sense of missing something that is so temporary anyway, I think it's quite an existential experience. And I suppose when you're growing up, obviously there's some things you remember, but then you wonder, did I remember that? Or is that a story I've been told so many times? Or is it a picture that I've seen that I've developed a narrative around and so on? So I'm really interested in how those memories are constantly, as you say, shifting and changing. And then you might, as you're older, hear more about that particular event. And suddenly you have to recalibrate and think about, oh gosh, I was very much seeing something from one perspective. And when I hear another side, I have to shift. So, it's that resisting change, but at the same time being at the mercy of it all the time and trying to make peace with that.
Yeah, that's true. And childhood and the Catholic Church. I mean, you're talking about memory, but obviously childhood comes in a lot to the book, but linked with the Catholic Church. And of course, food is there too. I'm thinking of a poem like 40 Days. It's full of the lushness. I love that actually, Victoria, of chocolate at Easter after the resurrection. Or a poem like Second Communion. If I eat Jesus, will he want to eat me? Soon it will be time to stutter up the aisle and be fed. So that linking of religion with food and gorging. I mean, I was raised a Catholic girl too, and I think it is an endlessly interesting subject to write about, I'd say you enjoyed it. Did you, Victoria?
Yeah, I think, when you think about going to Mass, and we have a beautiful church in Shanagarry, the Church of the Immaculate Conception, and it's really nice size and it's quite intimate and quite friendly. But I remember sitting there and I would, like it says in Second Communion, my mom had this amazing fur coat that, the irony, of course, being a vegetarian, but loving my mom's fur coat. And I would snuggle into it and then watch this extraordinary performance. And, literally the wine becoming blood and this wafer. I was so disappointed when I eventually got communion. I was so disappointed it wasn't actually flesh. Again, as a vegetarian, how strange. But I think that being so young and being exposed to language like that and concepts like that and very elevated ideas and very complex and sophisticated structures and poetry had a massive effect on my language and in fact a huge impact on how I see the world and how I view consumption. And, even, you spoke about Lent there, the Advent, and then this feast at Christmas and Lent, and then this feast at Easter, and how that ritual kind of implants itself on your everyday life in ways that you don't realize. So I think the language was a massive influence, the language of the church, and the beautiful imagery and sometimes shocking imagery. There's a lot of, really brutal imagery, even doing the Passion of the Christ. And I used to read at Mass as well. So having a real connection to that very powerful language when you wouldn't, it's not the language that you'd experience, at school or in the playground or at home. So I was really drawn to that.
Yeah. And speaking of language, you said that poetry has saved your life. It's made my life. Reading and writing, it has taught me bravery and honesty. And I'm just wondering, can you talk a little bit about that? Why did it save your life? And
yeah, I owe it so much, because I think growing up, I was very confused, and quite a depressive child and quite an anxious child. And I really felt it very difficult, trying to articulate these feelings. I think maybe now we're better at recognizing that in children and acknowledging, that they think about the meaning of life and, the impact that death has on them. And I come from a very, very big family, and we're kind of the last generation on both sides of a particular generation on both sides. So I experienced a lot of death of relatives from a very early age. And so that has an impact, I think. And I found reading, and I found then writing myself, an extraordinarily effective way of working through or acknowledging or in some way getting it out of me, I suppose, in a sense. Like you just record it there and you get a bit of relief, I suppose, from that feeling. And I think reading poets, and particularly when I was older, reading poets like Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath, and looking at how direct they are and how they use anger and they use anxiety and they use depression in ways that are so constructive and so vibrant and so funny as well, such dark humor. So I think it gave me a purpose in my life, poetry, and it gave me a reason. It is my reason. So when I don't write, I am not a nice person to be around. I get very worked up. And when I get it all down, it's like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Relief. And I suppose I remember hearing that phrase, it doesn't matter what you do, it only matters that you do it. And that really, some people might,
it's a relief.
Play camogie, or some people might build cars or whatever. But this is what gives my life meaning and purpose.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so we're going to move on every turn. We're going to hear you read another poem. It's called Hunger Strikes Columba of Rheta, 1467 to 1501. Saints and sinners, they play a huge part in this collection. So I'd love to hear you lead into this poem and read it, Victoria.
Yes, this poem forms part of what I call a broken sequence. These are poems, they all start with the title Hunger Strikes, and they engage with the lives of various different saints and martyrs over quite a long period in history, and the type of behaviours they enacted upon themselves, extreme behaviours, in an attempt, I suppose, to maybe grasp at some agency outside of being wives and mothers, and also perhaps as a reenactment of Christ's suffering and almost taking that on a female body as quite a revolutionary act. So this one is just about one of the saints, Columba of Rheta, who was known as a great mystic, came from a very poor family and was really known for fasting, and how that kind of, I suppose, connected her to piety and being pure and being perfect in a sense. She was also fond of wearing hair shirts, sleeping on thorns, and self-flagellation. So the trinity there. Hunger Strikes Columba of Rheta, 1467 to 1501. My body is a temple I keep clean for you, spotless, lashing my skin so it grows tired of bleeding. Wearing hair shirts, I cannot forget what it means to be alert. I have toured the Holy Land in visions I don't imagine they would understand what I see. When they came for me, the men, they ripped off my robes, expecting to find me virginal, untouched. How they gasped in horror. How glad I was that I had used myself like an old rag. Beating myself with that spiked chain shielded me. My breasts and hips so deformed, they ran from me, screaming.
Oh, thanks very much for that, Victoria. That was Victoria reading Hunger Strikes Columba of Rieti, 1467 to 1501, from her collection Eat or We Both Starve from Carcanet. And now, Victoria, it's time for the Toaster Challenge, where you get to talk about a book. It can be a book about anything that you really love and admire for just 3 minutes. So Peisha's going to get the toast sorted. Well, the bread ready.
No, I've timed this. I have it all like... It's a challenge. This
no
is
pressure
challenge,
at all,
so.
Victoria. Okay, so we're going to get the bread. It's in the toaster. 1, 2, 3, and off you go, Victoria.
Then the drawing on the label of our favourite red wine looks like my husband casting himself off a cliff in his fervour to get free of me. These are the opening lines to the title poem of Sharon Olds' 2012 collection, Stag's Leap. I heard Olds read from the collection at court in 2013 and I haven't recovered since. Olds, with her silver hair shining, recited poems of such emotional honesty and intimacy that the capacity audience gasped and rewarded her with a standing ovation. It felt like we were part of something, an awakening, perhaps, a renewed appreciation of the place where poetry and lived experience intertwine. So this book is really, really important to me, a touchstone of sorts. And lines like these from The Flurry: I tell him I will try to fall out of love with him, but I feel I will love him all my life, are a gut punch. How do we as human beings reach acceptance when life presents us with challenges and difficulties we do not want to endure or indeed experience at all? After 30 years of marriage, Olds' poems depict the pain, shock and incredulity of her husband's falling out of love with her when she's clearly still in love with him. The poems examine this love and loss, as well as age and youth, the body, what it is to be together and to be alone. Olds doesn't shy away from what we might often think of shameful emotions like loneliness, but explores them with sensitivity, pragmatism and grit. I've never seen the subject of marriage examined with such quiet honesty. Indeed, these subjects are what I am drawn to explore in my own work, and Olds' careful and thoughtful exposition of complex relationships and events very much inspired the candour I tried to bring to Eat or We Both Starve. The first poems in Stag's Leap are the first inkling, the first admissions, when it still might be otherwise, then the dawning that it was going to be real, how to tell her ancient mother, how to tell her own body that he is gone. And this is one of my favourites of the collection, Poem for the Breasts. All year they have been calling to my departed husband, singing to him like a pair of soaking sirens on a scaled rock. She turns over every subtle but horrible moment, like giving him back his things in object loss. The book is divided up into sections. Here is the moment she finds a picture of the other woman in the washing machine, and here is the moment where she wishes he had just died, that would be easier. Wonderful erotic detail informs us there was a reason she was so besotted of this man, and what to do with her eroticism now that he is gone. I loved that in a poem called French Bras. These are poems of recovery and ultimately of acceptance, a living through, a living with, a living beyond a life-altering loss. The issue she comes back to is how she had not really known how he felt, that she had made assumptions about him, that the betrayal was not just his. It is a beautiful, multifaceted collection equal to its subject, and all the more inspiring because Olds writes of a woman's experience of this loss in these poems. She centres female lived reality and presents it as valuable, vital and important. Following the inspiration of poets a generation or so above hers, Olds moves that struggle forward and clears the path for poets after her. She challenges me to be brave and to honour my own experience as worthy of poetry, to write usefully about what interests me without apology.
Well done, Victoria. I think the toast isn't burnt. Yeah, that was lovely to hear. And also, it's brilliant to be brought back to that really brilliant collection. I think it's full of intimate truths, isn't it, Victoria? I love the line, I did not know him, I knew my idea of him. And you mentioned the washing machine, when she finds the photograph in the washing machine, a brilliant poem. And then also even the idea that it was their favourite wine. And, you know, that there's lovely lines where she compares him the stag to her husband and says, when anyone escapes, my heart leaps up. But when it's I who am escaped from, I am half on the side of the lever. So such interesting poetry, isn't it?
It's absolutely fantastic. Fantastic.
I can see you use the word candour. I can see how the candour inspired you for your own collection. So really, Victoria, thank you so much for coming in to talk today about your debut collection, Eat or We Both Starve, published by Carcanet Press, the brilliant Carcanet Press, and also Stag's Leap by Sharon Olds, published by Cape Poetry. Victoria's holding it up there. What a wonderful collection. So thank you so much. And we'll end, Victoria, with you reading a poem called The Guest Room.
This is a poem towards the end of the collection, and I've always been fascinated with the guest room as a concept, and those of us, I suppose, lucky enough to have a room that we can keep as the guest room, because it is this strange liminal space within the house, and it's kind of set up to create a sense of perfection or almost of untouched domesticity. So this is a poem exploring those experiences. Guest room. I changed the duvet cover like she showed me, inside out, corner to corner, lifted over my head, seams must be flush. I fold a pyramid of towels jewelled with tiny soaps, body lotions borrowed from hotels, the red hot water bottle I'll fill later, her rubber husband. I shake and vac the carpet forest fresh, suck spiders' webs from each corner, grey and fuzzy, thick as pelts. My mother's perfume sniffs out that I did not iron the sheets. Her nightdress pressed into a perfect square, a village of potions on her bedside locker. My heart sags, an empty hammock yawning for the cradle of her arms, the animal comfort of her wolf fur coat. I hear her pottering in the kitchen, tidying. I turn out the light. Night cracks its knuckles. Thank you so much for having me, Peter and Enda. It's been wonderful, and I really love your podcast. Long may it rain.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. Bye, Victoria. Thank you. I think we've reached the end of our Books for Breakfast podcast this morning. I'm definitely rushing off to have more coffee. And I'm Enda Wiley, and I have Peter Sirr here with me. And Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the details of the podcast if they'd like to listen again?
Well, you can subscribe at all the usual sources, Google and Apple and so on. And if you want to check out the notes that go along with this podcast, you can go to booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And yeah, so
we'll be back again next Thursday morning. We'll have the toast on. We'll have the kettle boiling. We will have more books to discuss. And we're looking forward to having you here. So goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.